The wind carried dust across the open land. The sun was sinking low, burning orange against the dry sky. A crow circled above the barn, cawing once before it disappeared behind the ridge. The ranch was silent, except for the slow creak of the windmill and the faint breath of a woman standing at the edge of the porch. Her hands shook. Her eyes darted between the ground and the man who stood a few feet away from her. He didn't move. His hat cast a shadow over his face, hiding his eyes, but his jaw was tight. His boots were planted firm in the dirt, as if he was holding the earth together by standing still. The woman swallowed hard, pressing her hand to her chest. Her voice cracked as she whispered almost to herself, "I can't hold it in anymore." The words hung in the air, heavier than the heat. The rancher blinked once, slow, uncertain. The horses in the corral shifted restlessly, their hooves kicking up little clouds of dust. Something in her tone made them nervous too. She stepped closer, but her knees buckled slightly, like her strength was slipping away. He wanted to ask what she meant, but his throat closed up. He'd heard those words before, years ago, from someone he never wanted to remember. The wind picked up again, carrying the smell of dry hay and old wood. His heartbeat grew louder in his chest, steady but tense, like the rhythm before a storm. The woman looked up at him, her eyes wet and full of something between fear and guilt. "Please," she said softly, "you have to understand." He didn't answer. He couldn't. Every part of him wanted to turn away, but his boots wouldn't move. There was something in her voice that pulled him back, something that reminded him of the ghosts he thought he'd buried long ago. A moment passed, then another. Time seemed to slow, stretching thin, almost breaking. Her breath caught, sharp and shaky. She looked like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to fall. And in that instant, before he could speak, she gasped again, louder this time, desperate, and everything around them felt ready to snap. The ranch stretched for miles in every direction, a sea of yellow grass and cracked earth that shimmered beneath the sun. It was the kind of place where silence spoke louder than words, where time didn't pass, it lingered. Fences leaned tiredly against the wind, and the old barn, painted red decades ago, had faded to a dull brown. The air was dry, tasting faintly of dust and iron. Every step you took crunched, and every echo seemed to travel for miles before dying in the emptiness. This was the rancher's world. He'd lived here longer than anyone could remember. No one knew where he came from, and no one asked. The folks in town only knew him as Clay. They said he kept to himself, didn't go to church, didn't visit the saloon. He rode into town once a month for supplies, flour, salt, and whiskey, and left before anyone could strike up a conversation. People whispered about him, about the scar on his hand, about the night years ago when his house caught fire and someone screamed inside. But Clay never answered questions, and over time people stopped asking. The land was his only companion now, and it didn't demand explanations. It just asked that he keep it alive. He worked the ranch from dawn till dark, fixing fences, tending to the few cattle that hadn't wandered off, and patching the roof when storms rolled in. Nights were harder. Nights were when the memories came back, flashes of faces, voices, and things he wished he'd done differently. That day had started like any other. The morning air had been cold, the kind that cuts your lungs when you breathe. Clay saddled his horse, checked the water troughs, and watched the horizon for signs of a storm. It was quiet, too quiet. He didn't hear the woman until she was already halfway up the road, stumbling toward the gate with one hand gripping her side. At first he thought she was lost. Maybe from town, maybe from somewhere further. She looked like she'd been walking for hours. Her clothes were torn, her face pale beneath the dust. When she saw him, she stopped, as if unsure whether to run or collapse. "Please," she said, her voice thin and trembling. "Please help me." He froze. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to him like that, with fear but also hope. She took another step, then another, before her knees gave out. Clay caught her just before she hit the ground. Her skin was burning with fever, her pulse faint. He carried her into the shade of the porch, lowering her gently onto an old bench. Her lips moved, but her words were a jumble, something about running, something about someone coming. He poured her a little water and she drank greedily, then coughed, shaking her head. "He'll find me," she whispered. "He always finds me." Clay frowned. "Who?" But she didn't answer. Her eyes fluttered shut, and for a moment he thought she was gone. Then she gasped, a short, sharp sound, and clutched his arm. "Don't let him take me back," she breathed. He didn't know who she was talking about, but the fear in her eyes stirred something deep inside him, something he thought had long since died. He looked out at the road. The horizon was empty, a blur of heat and dust. No one was coming, not yet. He carried her inside, laid her on the small couch in his living room, and covered her with an old quilt. The room smelled of wood smoke and leather, of long days and lonely nights. There were no photographs on the walls, no sign of anyone else ever living there. The woman stirred, muttering something under her breath, words that made no sense to him. Hours passed before she woke again. The sun had dropped lower, turning the sky gold. When she opened her eyes, they darted around the room before landing on him. "Where am I?" she asked. "My ranch," he said quietly. "You fainted out by the gate." She sat up, wincing. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trouble you. I had nowhere else to go." Clay shook his head. "You're safe here." She laughed, a hollow sound. "Safe?" Her hands tightened around the quilt. "No one's safe, not from him." There was that word again, asterisk him. Clay wanted to ask, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way her voice cracked when she said it. Maybe it was because he understood what it was like to run from something you couldn't name. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the cracks in the windows. He poured coffee and handed her a cup. She held it close, letting the steam warm her trembling fingers. For a while they said nothing. The ranch creaked and groaned as the sun dipped behind the hills. Finally, she spoke again. "Do you live out here alone?" "Yeah." "Why?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence told her enough. She nodded slowly. "You're hiding too." Clay glanced at her, then really looked at her, the bruise on her cheek, the cut on her lip, the small scar on her collarbone. She wasn't just running from someone. She was running from something that had broken her. He stood and looked out the window. The horizon was darkening, and for the first time he thought he saw movement, small, distant, but real. A cloud of dust. A wagon maybe, or a rider. "Someone following you?" he asked. She hesitated. "He doesn't stop." Clay's hand clenched around his coffee cup. The scar on his palm itched, the old burn twisting like it was alive again. He didn't ask more questions. He didn't want to know names or stories. He just needed to decide, help her or send her away. The woman shifted on the couch. "If you want me gone, I'll go. I don't want to bring trouble." He turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "You can stay for the night." Her eyes softened. "Thank you." But even as she said it, he felt something tighten in his chest. The air in the room grew heavy. He knew what happened when you let strangers in. He knew how quickly kindness could turn to regret. As night fell, the ranch changed. The crickets started their song, the sky turned a deep blue, and shadows crept across the fields. Clay lit a single lamp. The flame flickered, casting long, trembling shapes across the walls. The woman sat quietly, staring into the light. Her lips moved as if she was whispering to someone who wasn't there. Clay caught only fragments. "Forgive me, I had to, he'll never stop." He stepped closer. "You need rest." She nodded, her eyes unfocused. "You don't understand," she said softly. "I didn't mean to, but I couldn't hold it in anymore." Her words sent a chill down his spine. He didn't know what she meant, but he would soon. The night deepened, pressing against the windows like a weight. The wind had quieted, but the silence that followed felt worse. It wasn't peaceful. It was expectant, heavy, waiting for something to happen. The lamp on the table flickered, throwing small bursts of light across the wooden floor. Clay sat in his chair near the door, boots still on, rifle across his lap. The woman slept on the couch, or at least she tried to. Every few minutes, she turned or muttered something under her breath. Her dreams weren't kind. He watched her for a while, trying to read the story in her face. Her skin was pale, the bruise on her cheek deeper in the lamplight. The way her hand gripped the edge of the blanket made him think she was ready to run even in her sleep. Clay rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the old ache in his shoulders. He told himself she'd leave in the morning, that she was just another wanderer passing through, but that wasn't true. He could feel it. Trouble had found its way to his doorstep again, just like it always did. Outside, the horses stirred. One of them snorted, a short, sharp sound that made Clay sit up. He looked toward the window. The yard was dark, except for the faint moonlight glinting off the fence posts. For a moment he thought he saw something move, just a shape low and fast near the barn. He stood slowly, the floor creaking under his weight. The woman shifted, waking. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from sleep. Clay motioned for her to stay quiet. He moved to the window and peered out again. Nothing, just shadows. He exhaled, the sound barely audible. "Probably a coyote," he said, though he didn't believe it. She sat up, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes were wide now, darting toward the door. "He's close," she said. "I can feel it." Clay turned toward her. "You're safe here," he said, but even as he spoke the words, they felt weak. She shook her head. "No, you don't understand. He doesn't stop. He never stops." Her hands trembled as she pressed them to her chest. Clay noticed the faint marks on her wrists, bruises, circular, like fingers that had dug too hard. He looked away, jaw tight. He'd seen that kind of fear before, years ago. It always came with someone chasing it. "What did you do?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "I told the truth," she said finally, her voice shaking. "And he said he'd make me pay for it." Clay frowned. "Who?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted to the window, following something only she could see. "My husband," she whispered. Clay felt a strange mix of anger and pity rise inside him. "You're married." "Not anymore," she said bitterly. "He thinks he owns me. Thinks I can't breathe without his permission." She turned to look at him, her gaze sharp now, cutting through the haze of fear. "I couldn't live like that anymore. I couldn't keep the lie, so I ran. I told the sheriff what he did, what he's done for years, and now," her voice broke, "now he's coming." The fire inside the lamp hissed softly. Clay's throat felt dry. He didn't know what to say. He'd seen men like that before, men who thought they were gods in their own homes. Men who hurt because they could. The kind that never faced justice because no one stood up to them. He thought about how the woman had collapsed at his gate, how her eyes had begged for safety. And he thought about the night his own house burned, the screams that had followed him into every dream since. He leaned back against the wall, his fingers brushing the scar on his palm. "You picked a dangerous road," he muttered. "I didn't pick it," she said softly. "I just ran down the only one left." For a long while neither of them spoke. The only sound was the steady ticking of the clock above the fireplace. Each second felt louder than the last, like it was counting down to something they couldn't stop. Clay's mind wandered back to the shape he thought he saw outside. He needed to check the barn before morning, but part of him didn't want to step into the dark. Finally, he said, "You can stay the night. Tomorrow I'll take you to town. The sheriff will know what to do." Her face twisted at the word. "The sheriff," she repeated quietly. "He's his friend. There's nowhere safe in town. That's why I came here. I heard about you, about what you did before." Clay froze, his heartbeat stuttered. "What do you think you heard?" She met his eyes. "That you killed a man once, that you did it for someone else." He didn't answer. The story had been buried for years, along with the name of the man he killed and the reason why. It wasn't justice, not really. It was something darker, something he'd tried to forget. The woman lowered her voice. "I don't care what you did. I just need somewhere to breathe, just for one night." He stared at her, seeing not the bruises or the dirt, but the quiet desperation underneath. The kind of plea that came from the soul. He nodded once. "Then you'll stay," he said, though his voice was rough. The rest of the night dragged on, slow and uneasy. Clay didn't sleep. He kept the rifle close, eyes fixed on the door. Every sound made him twitch, the groan of the wind, the scrape of branches on the wall, the faint shift of the woman's breathing. Around midnight she stirred again, whispering things he couldn't quite hear. He leaned forward. "You all right?" Her eyes opened, glassy and distant. "He used to come in the dark," she said, barely above a breath. "He'd stand in the doorway and watch me, Didn't have to say a word, I could feel him there. She looked toward the shadows. I still feel him. Clay's stomach tightened. He's not here. She blinked, her expression lost between dream and memory. He will be, she murmured. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the window again. The night was colder now, and the moon was thin, almost gone. The barn loomed in the distance like a dark animal crouching in the dirt. Nothing moved, but the quiet didn't comfort him. It pressed harder, heavier. He turned back toward the woman, meaning to tell her to get some rest, but she was already watching him. Her eyes were wide open, glinting faintly in the dim light. "You know what it's like, don't you?" she said softly. "To hide from something you can't fight." He didn't deny it. He couldn't. She nodded slowly as if he'd spoken. "That's why I came here. I thought maybe you'd understand." He did. More than he wanted to. The silence stretched again, thick as smoke. He thought about his own ghosts, the things he'd buried under the dirt of this land. Maybe, he thought, some people never stopped running. They just ran in circles until the past caught up. Outside, far off in the distance, a single sound broke the stillness. A low rumble, faint but growing. Clay's eyes narrowed. It wasn't thunder. It was hooves. Someone was coming. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the hills, staining the sky a dull gray. The ranch looked almost peaceful in that half-light, but Clay could feel the lie in it. The air carried a charge, thick, heavy, like the seconds before lightning splits the sky. He hadn't slept a minute. Every creak of the old boards, every whisper of the wind through the rafters had kept his eyes open. The woman sat at the kitchen table now, her hair tangled, face pale and streaked with dried tears. She wrapped her hands around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Clay stood by the window, one hand resting on the rifle propped against the wall. Neither of them spoke for a long while. The silence between them had grown into something solid, something that filled the whole room. Finally, she broke it. "You heard them, didn't you?" Her voice was hoarse, low. Clay didn't turn. "Heard what?" "The horses," she said, her fingers tightening around the cup. "Last night they were scared. He's close." He looked over his shoulder, his eyes shadowed. Could have been anything, coyotes, a rider passing through. She shook her head. "No. I know him. I can feel when he's near." He wanted to argue, to call it fear talking, but something about the way she said it stopped him. It wasn't panic. It was certainty. The kind that comes from living with danger too long. The woman stood and walked to the window beside him. Her reflection looked like a ghost in the glass, thin, trembling, half gone. "He told me once," she whispered, "that if I ever ran, he'd find me. He said it didn't matter where I hid. Said the ground itself would tell him where I was." Clay didn't answer. His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking in his cheek. He'd heard words like that before, too, back when men thought they owned everything they touched. He thought about the sound he'd heard last night, the faint rhythm of hooves. Maybe he'd imagined it, but maybe he hadn't. The wind picked up again, whistling across the porch. The horses stirred in the corral, their nervous snorts echoing faintly. Clay turned from the window and moved toward the door. "Stay inside," he said quietly. "I'll check the barn." Her hand shot out, catching his arm. "Don't go out there," she said sharply. "Please." He looked down at her grip, then at her face. "I've handled worse," he said. She shook her head. "You don't understand what he's capable of." Clay gently pulled free, grabbed the rifle, and stepped outside. The door creaked shut behind him, and the air felt colder than before. The sky was pale, the color of ash. He walked slowly across the yard, boots crunching against the dirt. Every sound seemed louder, the flap of the barn door in the breeze, the rustle of grass, the beat of his own heart. He stopped halfway to the barn. There faint tracks in the dirt, hoofprints, fresh, not from his horses. He crouched down, tracing one with his hand. Whoever it was had come close, too close, then circled back toward the hills. A sound behind him, soft, quick. Clay spun, rifle raised. The woman stood in the doorway, clutching the quilt around her shoulders. "I told you," she whispered. "He's here." "Get back inside," Clay ordered, but she didn't move. Her eyes darted past him toward the ridge. He followed her gaze. For a moment there was nothing but the rising light. Then he saw it, a flicker of movement near the horizon. A dark figure on horseback, still and watching. Clay's breath hitched. The rider didn't move closer, didn't call out. Just sat there as if measuring the distance. After a few seconds, the figure turned and disappeared over the ridge. He lowered the rifle slowly. "Could be anyone," he muttered. She shook her head. "It's him." Clay said nothing. He walked back toward the porch, each step slower than the last. The woman watched him, her expression hollow, like she'd seen this all before. Inside, the air felt heavy again. He set the rifle on the table, poured himself a drink, and downed it in one swallow. The burn steadied his hands, but not his thoughts. "You said you told the sheriff," he said finally. "You really think he'd help your husband?" She nodded. "They hunt together, drink together. He warned me once, said if I ever talked, no one would believe me, said I'd just disappear." Clay rubbed his temples. "You sure you didn't kill him?" Her head snapped up. "What? You said you ran. You said he'd never stop coming. Men like that don't usually chase ghosts. You sure he's still alive?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked away, her face tightening. "I don't know," she whispered. "I think so. I think," she stopped herself. Clay leaned forward. "You think so?" Her breath trembled. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way," she said softly. "I just wanted him to stop. I didn't mean to." The air in the room shifted. Clay straightened slowly. "What did you do?" She looked at him, eyes wide, glistening with fear. "He came home drunk. He grabbed me. I fought back. I don't even remember everything. There was blood, so much blood. I thought he was dead. But then, a week later, someone left a note on my door." Her voice cracked. "It said you didn't finish the job." Clay exhaled slowly, the sound harsh in the silence. The words hung in the air like smoke. He turned toward the window again. The road stretched empty under the morning light, but it no longer felt safe. She sank into the chair, hands shaking. "I tried to hide. Every place I went, someone followed. I saw his hat once in a market, heard his whistle in the woods. I don't sleep anymore." She looked up at him. "He always finds me." Clay's eyes darkened. "Then you'll stay here for now." "You don't owe me that," she said. He looked away. "Maybe not." Outside, a cloud passed over the sun, dimming the light. The world seemed to hold its breath again. Clay moved to the corner and opened an old trunk. Inside were tools, spare bullets, a folded coat, and a small photograph. A woman's face stared back at him, smiling faintly. He turned the picture over, burn marks along the edge. He closed the trunk slowly, the memories clawing their way back. The fire, the screams, the moment he hesitated, and what it cost him. He set the photograph down and picked up the rifle again. The woman watched him quietly. "You've done this before, haven't you?" she said softly. He didn't answer. "Protected someone," she continued. "Or tried to." Clay's voice was low. "Didn't work out." She lowered her eyes. "Maybe this time will." He wanted to believe her, but the words felt thin against the weight of everything he'd seen. The wind pressed harder against the windows, and somewhere far off, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from the ground. The sound of hooves again, closer this time. The woman stood, her face drained of color. "He's here," she whispered. Clay chambered a round into the rifle, his voice calm but cold. "Then let him come." The sound came first, low, steady, growing heavier with each passing second. Clay's pulse matched it, each beat in his chest falling into rhythm with the thud of hooves. The ground itself seemed to breathe beneath his boots. The woman stood frozen near the table, eyes wide and unfocused, like she was staring into a memory she couldn't escape. He moved to the window, peering through the thin curtain. A dark shape emerged from the edge of the field. One rider. Black horse, broad shoulders. The man sat straight in the saddle, hat low, face shadowed. He wasn't rushing, wasn't hiding. He was taking his time, like someone who knew he'd already won. Clay's jaw clenched. "You recognize him?" The woman didn't answer. Her hand came up to her mouth, trembling. Then she nodded once, barely. "It's him," she whispered. The rider stopped at the gate. He didn't dismount. He just sat there, head slightly tilted, like he was studying the house. The horse pawed the dirt, restless, impatient. Clay felt the tension in the air twist tighter. "You stay inside," he said. She caught his arm, voice breaking. "He'll kill you." Clay's voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. He's already tried. He pulled free and stepped outside. The morning light had turned sharp and cold, the kind that made every shadow look alive. The smell of dry grass and iron filled the air. The rider's horse shifted as Clay walked toward the gate, rifle in hand but lowered at his side. "You're a long way from town," Clay called out. His voice echoed against the empty land. The man didn't move. "You've got something that belongs to me," he said finally. His voice was deep, rough, like gravel dragged across stone. Clay stopped a few yards short of the fence. "Don't see your name on anything here." The rider leaned forward slightly, the brim of his hat lifting just enough for the light to touch his face. Clay saw the scar first, a deep cut running from the corner of his mouth to his jaw. Then the eyes, cold, gray, and steady. "She's mine," the man said simply. Clay's grip on the rifle tightened. "She's not property." The man smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. "You think I came all this way for property?" He dismounted, boots landing hard in the dirt. The horse flinched, then stilled as if it knew better than to move. "You don't know what she did." Clay's tone was flat. "Don't care." The man chuckled, a sound with no humor. "You should, you're harboring a killer." Clay didn't flinch, but the words hit harder than he expected. "You talk too much," he said. The man took a slow step forward, hands empty but confident. "You think you're her savior. You think she's some poor victim." He tilted his head. "Ask her what she buried behind the house. Go on." Clay's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" The man smiled again, eyes glinting. "She didn't tell you. Of course she didn't. Women like her never do. They play soft, scared, until you turn your back." Clay took one step closer, raising the rifle slightly. "You've said enough." Behind him, the door opened. The woman's voice cut through the tension. "Stop!" Both men turned. She stood barefoot on the porch, the wind pulling at her hair, her face pale but set. "Don't listen to him," she said to Clay. "He's lying." The man's eyes softened mockingly. "Lying? Sweetheart, you should know better than that. You told me yourself you couldn't hold it in anymore." Her breath caught and the color drained from her face. Clay looked between them, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What's he talking about?" She shook her head. "He's twisting it. He used to hurt me. She killed our boy," the man interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. The words hit like thunder. Clay froze. The woman's lips parted, but no sound came. The air went still, so still that even the wind seemed afraid to move. "That's a lie," she whispered. "You killed him." The man's smirk faded. "Tell him what you did," he said, stepping closer. "Tell him how you held him under the water because you couldn't stand the crying. Tell him you ran before I even buried him." Clay's mind spun. He turned to the woman. "Is that true?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "He's twisting it," she said again, weaker this time. "He beat him. I tried to stop it. I tried to save him. He's the monster, not me." Clay's chest rose and fell slowly. He'd seen lies before, seen the way people shaped them to survive. But this one tore something inside him. He looked from one to the other, the weight of the rifle suddenly heavier in his hands. The man took another step forward. "You see, she ruins everything she touches. You think you're helping her, you're next." Clay's finger brushed the trigger. The woman screamed, "Don't!" The sound cracked through the air. The man froze mid-step, watching Clay's eyes. There was no fear there, only pity. "You think you're any better," he said quietly. Clay didn't answer. The rifle fired. The echo rolled across the plains like thunder. The man staggered back, one hand pressed to his chest. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then he dropped to his knees, dust swirling around him. The woman stood frozen on the porch, her hands over her mouth. Clay's heart pounded in his ears, drowning out everything else. The man coughed once, blood on his lips, and looked up at him. "She lied to you," he rasped. Then he fell forward, face in the dirt. Silence. Clay lowered the rifle slowly, his hands shaking. The woman's voice came through the ringing in his head, faint and trembling. "You didn't have to do that." He turned to her. "He was going to kill you." She stared at the body on the ground. "Maybe I deserved it," Clay frowned. "Don't say that." Her eyes lifted to meet his, hollow and wet. "You don't know what I did." He took a step closer, his voice low. "Then tell me." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her gaze drifted past him to the lifeless shape in the dirt. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way," she whispered. He wouldn't stop shouting. He kept saying it was my fault. And maybe it was. Clay wanted to speak, to ask, to understand, but something in her face stopped him. It was the same look he'd seen years ago in the mirror, the night he'd lost everything. The look of someone who'd crossed a line and could never go back. He looked down at the man's body again. The dust had started to settle, the morning sun crawling higher across the plains. It was over, but it didn't feel like it. The woman stepped off the porch, bare feet sinking into the dirt. She knelt beside the man, her hands trembling as she brushed the dust from his sleeve. "He was cruel," she said softly, "but he was still mine once." Clay said nothing. He just stood there, rifle hanging loose in his hand, the sound of the shot still echoing in his chest. The ranch was quiet again, but it wasn't the kind of quiet he knew. This one was deeper, heavier, the kind that stays. The sun had climbed high, but the light felt strange, too bright, too white, like it was trying to wash away what had just happened. Clay stood motionless beside the body, sweat tracing lines through the dust on his face. The smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air. The woman knelt in the dirt a few feet away, her hands stained red where she'd touched the man's shirt. She wasn't crying anymore. Her eyes were hollow, staring at nothing, as if her mind had stepped out of her body and gone someplace far away. Clay ran a hand down his face and turned toward the house. He needed water. He needed a second to think. But every step he took felt heavier than the last. Inside, the room looked the same broken clock, same faint smell of coffee, but everything had changed. His world had changed. He poured a glass of water and drank slowly, staring at his shaking hands. Outside, the wind picked up again, scattering dust across the yard. The ranch had gone quiet, too quiet. Even the horses seemed uneasy, their movements restless, uncertain. Through the window, he could see her still kneeling beside the man's body, her hair catching the sunlight, her fingers tracing the dirt like she was drawing something invisible. After a long while, she stood up. Her steps were slow, deliberate. When she reached the porch, Clay turned, waiting for her to speak, but she didn't. She just stood there, looking past him, her gaze drifting through the house like she was searching for something she'd lost long ago. "He's gone," she said finally, her voice thin, almost whispering. Clay nodded once. "I know. I thought I'd feel different." He didn't answer. She leaned against the doorframe, her face shadowed. "You think it's over now?" Clay looked out the window again, his jaw tight. "Nothing's ever over," he said quietly. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment before she stepped inside. She walked to the table, the floorboards creaking under her bare feet, and sank into the chair. She folded her arms on the table and rested her head against them. For a moment, she looked small, like a child hiding from a storm. He moved toward her, hesitating by the counter. "You should clean up," he said softly. "You're bleeding." She lifted her head slowly. "It's not mine." The words sank deep. Clay turned away. He busied himself with small things, washing the glass, setting it down, staring at the water circling the sink. The routine steadied him, even as his mind refused to quiet. The woman spoke again, her voice almost too soft to hear. "You think I lied to you?" Clay froze. He didn't turn around. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." He looked down at his hands. "He was coming for you, that's all that mattered." She laughed, a broken sound, dry and bitter. "You think this was about saving me?" He turned then, his eyes dark. "Wasn't it?" She shook her head, staring down at the table. "You think you saved me from him, but you don't even know what I've done." Clay's voice dropped lower. "Then tell me." Her hands clenched. "It wasn't just him I ran from." She swallowed hard, her words shaking. "I told you I tried to stop him that night. That's not true. I didn't try hard enough. I froze, I watched. And when it was over, I ran." Clay stayed silent. The only sound was the steady hum of the wind outside. She continued, voice trembling. "I told myself he was dead, that if I ran far enough it wouldn't matter. But every time I closed my eyes I saw it again. The water, his face, my boy." Her last word broke apart in her throat. She pressed her hands to her mouth, her whole body trembling. Clay didn't move. He just stood there, caught between anger, pity, and something he couldn't name. Finally, he said, "You were scared." She nodded weakly. "Yes. But I was also angry. I thought if I told the sheriff, maybe I'd be free, but it just made it worse. Everyone thought I was lying, everyone except him. He came after me to make me remember." Her shoulders shook. "And now you killed him for me." Clay leaned back against the counter, his expression hard to read. "I've done worse for less." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "Do you regret it?" He didn't answer right away. The question hung there, fragile and sharp. "No," he said finally, "but I will." The clock ticked once, loud in the stillness. She looked down again. "I wish I could undo it all. The running, the hiding, the fear. But it's too late, isn't it?" Clay walked to the door, opening it just enough for the sunlight to spill across the floor. Too late for what? For forgiveness. He looked out at the land, endless, dry, silent. The kind of place that didn't care who was right or wrong. It just swallowed everything and kept on standing. "Forgiveness don't mean much out here," he said quietly. "Out here, you just keep moving." She stood, wiping at her face, her fingers trembling. "And if I can't move on?" "Then you stay," he said simply, "until you can." She stared at him for a long time, her eyes tired but softer now. "Why are you helping me?" Clay turned from the door, meeting her gaze. "Because someone once helped me when they shouldn't have. I didn't deserve it either." The words hung heavy between them, full of ghosts neither wanted to name. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of distant thunder, though the sky was clear. The world always found a way to echo the past. Hours passed. The sun moved higher, the air hotter, thicker. Clay dug a shallow grave behind the barn. He didn't speak, didn't look at the woman. She stood nearby, silent, her hands clasped together. When he finished, he wiped the sweat from his brow and stepped back. "Say what you need to say," he murmured. She stepped forward, looking down at the fresh mound of dirt. Her voice shook, barely a whisper. "I hope you find peace," she said. "Somewhere I couldn't." Clay didn't know if she was talking to the man, to herself, or to both of them. He just watched as she knelt, pressing her hand to the ground like she was sealing a promise she couldn't keep. When they went back inside, the air felt cooler, lighter. For the first time in days, the tension loosened, though it never left completely. Clay poured them both a drink. They sat across from each other at the table, the silence softer now. After a long time, she spoke. "What happens now?" Clay took a slow breath. "Now," he looked at the door, at the open land beyond it. "Now we wait." For what? He didn't answer. He didn't know. Maybe for the law, maybe for peace. Maybe for something neither of them would ever find. The woman followed his gaze out to the horizon. The sun was setting again, turning the plains gold and red. For a moment, it almost looked beautiful. But beneath that beauty there was still the dust, still the blood, still the weight of everything that had been done. She reached for her glass, her voice quiet but certain. "He used to say silence could hide anything." Clay looked at her, his eyes tired. "He was wrong," he said. "Out here, silence doesn't hide a thing. It remembers." The wind shifted through the open window, carrying the faint echo of her gasp from the night before, soft, broken, haunting. And somewhere deep in the empty fields, a single crow cried out before the world went quiet again.